My name is Adeline Spencer. I'm 25 years old, and last month my grandmother handed me a sealed envelope that destroyed everything I believed about my family. For as long as I can remember, my parents called me adopted in spirit. Their way of explaining why my brother got birthday parties while I got chores, why he got a car while I got silence, why he was celebrated and I was invisible. I believed them. For 25 years, I believed I wasn't really theirs. Then on my birthday, which my family had conveniently turned into my brother's MBA graduation party, Grandma pulled me aside, pressed that envelope into my hands and whispered, "Don't open this at home." I sat in my car for an hour. When I finally read the first line, I whispered out loud, "No way." Before I tell you what was inside, please take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if this story genuinely resonates with you. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. To the first time my father looked at me and said I wasn't really his. I grew up in a colonial-style house in suburban Connecticut. For bedrooms, white shutters, a wraparound porch that looked like something out of a magazine. My grandmother Eleanor bought it for my parents as a wedding gift. It was the kind of house that whispered old money, even if we didn't have much of it ourselves. There's a family portrait hanging in the living room. I'm in it, technically. But if you look closely, you'll notice I'm standing at the edge of the frame, half a step behind everyone else, like an afterthought. Like someone the photographer almost forgot to include. The first time I heard the phrase adopted in spirit was when I was 8 years old. It was a Tuesday, I remember, because my birthday had been the Saturday before, except we hadn't celebrated it. My brother Derek had a soccer tournament that weekend and Dad said his game was a team commitment. My birthday was just a day. Mom promised we'd celebrate the following week. That week never came. So on that Tuesday, sitting at the dinner table, I asked a simple question. Why does Derek get the bigger bedroom? Dad didn't even look up from his steak. Because Derek is different, Adeline. You're not like us, not really. You're adopted in spirit. We chose to keep you, but that doesn't mean you're entitled to the same things as your brother. I was 8. I didn't know what adopted in spirit meant. I just knew it made my chest hurt. Mom reached over and patted my hand. Your father loves you in his own way, sweetheart. I learned later that his own way meant silence. It meant chores. It meant being invisible in plain sight. And it meant that for the next 17 years, I would believe I wasn't really theirs. Let me show you what adopted in spirit looked like in practice. Derek's 16th birthday. Dad bought him a cherry red Jeep Wrangler. They threw a party for 50 people in the backyard, complete with a DJ and a 3-tiered cake from the fancy bakery downtown. My 16th birthday, a family dinner at home. A sheet cake from Costco with my name misspelled Adeline because Mom was in a rush. Dad forgot he had a work dinner and didn't make it back in time. I blew out the candles alone while Mom scrolled through her phone. When Derek left for college, both my parents flew out to help him move into his dorm. They rented a U-Haul. They took 3 days off work. They cried at the airport when I left for college, a school I'd gotten into on a scholarship. Because they refused to pay, Mom handed me a bus ticket and said, "You can manage, right? Derek needs a car this weekend." I managed for Derek's high school graduation. Dad gave him a Rolex, not a cheap one, the kind with the gold band that catches the light just right. For my son, Dad said, his voice thick with pride, the man of the next generation. For my graduation, I received a $50 Amazon gift card. No speech. No, I'm proud of you. Just a card that Mom had clearly bought at the last minute because it said, "Happy graduation" in generic blue font. But there was one person who never forgot me. Grandma Eleanor. Every year on my actual birthday, a card would arrive in the mail. Always the same lavender paper. Always the same looping handwriting. Always the same message. Remember who you are, my darling. The truth always surfaces. I didn't understand what she meant, not then. Adopted in spirit wasn't just a label, it was a system. When tuition bills came, Dad shook his Head. Real family comes first, Adeline. We have to prioritize Derek's education. So I worked 2 jobs through college, waitressing at a diner and tutoring math. On weekends while carrying a full course. Load. I graduated with $47,000 in student loans and a degree in accounting. Derek graduated debt-free with a car, an apartment deposit, and a trip to Europe as a graduation gift. When there were chores to be done, guess who did them? You need to earn your place. Mom would say, handing me a mop while Derek played video games in his room. I scrubbed toilets. I washed dishes. I learned that my value in that house was measured in labor, not love. When family decisions were made, vacations, holidays, even what to have for dinner, I was excluded. This is between blood. Relatives. Dad would say, as if the blood running through my veins was somehow different from theirs. I moved out at 22, right after graduation. Found a studio apartment in Hartford for $1,100 a month, more than I could comfortably afford, but it was mine. A space where no one could tell me I didn't belong. One day, our old neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, mentioned something in passing. Your grandmother was so generous to buy that house for your parents. Not many mothers-in-law would do that. I asked Mom about it later. She waved her hand dismissively. That's ancient history, Adeline. The house is ours now. But something about her tone didn't sit right. There was a flicker of something in her eyes. Nervousness, maybe. Or guilt. I filed it away in my mind. Just another piece of a puzzle I didn't yet know I was solving. Fast forward to last month. I was 25 years old working as a staff accountant at a mid-sized logistics company. Salary $52,000 a year. Nothing glamorous, but it was honest work and it was mine. I was sitting at my desk reviewing quarterly reports when my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Family celebration this Saturday. Derek's MBA graduation. Don't be late. No mention of my birthday. Of course. I started typing a polite decline. I had plans. I was busy. The usual excuses. When my phone rang, the caller ID showed a Connecticut number I recognized immediately. Grandma, Adeline, my darling. Her voice was thinner than I remembered, but still warm. Still her. I need you to come home this Saturday. I wasn't planning to. I know, but I have something important to give. You. She paused, and I could hear her, breathing, slow and deliberate. It's been 25 years in the making. Something in her voice made my stomach tighten. What do you mean? I set something aside for you the day you were born, she said softly. When I saw the way your father looked at you, like you were a disappointment, before you even opened your eyes, I knew then that I had to protect you. I didn't know what to say. The words hung there heavy with meaning I couldn't quite grasp. Come home, Adeline. Saturday. I'll explain everything. That night, I booked a flight to Connecticut. I told myself it was just a family visit, just a birthday dinner I'd endure for Grandma's sake. But deep down, I knew something was about to change. I just didn't know how much. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. I pulled into the driveway at noon, my rental car looking modest next to Derek's BMW X5, the one Dad had bought him last year for being such a hard worker. The house looked the same as always. White shutters, manicured lawn, the kind of suburban perfection that had all sorts of dysfunction. But today, something was different. A massive banner hung across the front porch. Congratulations, Derek. MBA class of 2026. No mention of my birthday, not even a footnote. Inside, the house was chaos. Caterers were setting up tables. Florists were arranging centerpieces. The air smelled like expensive perfume and fresh flowers. Lilies, Derek's favorite. Mom spotted me in the foyer. Oh, good, you're here. She thrust a piece of paper into my hands. Here's the list. Tables need to be set up in the backyard. Bathrooms need cleaning. Oh, and the caterers need someone to direct them. They keep putting things in the wrong places. Where's Derek? In his room, resting before the party. She said it like it was obvious. Like of course Derek would rest while I worked. I glanced at the list. It was long, very long. And the guests arriving at 4 o'clock. 40 people. Family. Friends, your father's colleagues. She was already walking away. Make sure everything's perfect, Adeline. I stood there holding that list, feeling the familiar weight of invisibility settle onto my shoulders. Then I saw it, on the hallway table, half hidden under a stack of mail. A lavender envelope with my name on it. Grandma's handwriting, a birthday card. It had been opened, read, and tossed. Aside like junk mail, they hadn't even bothered to give it to me. By 4 o'clock, the backyard was transformed into a celebration fit for royalty. Derek's. Royalty anyway. White tents twinkling. Lights, a champagne tower that sparkled. In the afternoon sun, 40 guests milled about in designer outfits, laughing and toasting and pretending to care about MBA programs. I stood by the catering table in the same black dress I'd worn to 3 other family events, watching my father command the room. Everyone. Dad clinked his champagne flute with a fork. The crowd quieted. I want to make a toast to my son, Derek. My legacy, my pride. The guests raised their glasses. Dad's voice swelled with emotion. From the moment Derek was born, I knew he was destined for greatness. He's everything I ever hoped for in a son. Smart, driven, ambitious. And now with his MBA, he's ready to take on the world. Applause, cheers. Derek stood beside Dad, beaming, wearing a new Ralph Lauren suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Not a single word about me. Not even a mention that today was my birthday, too. I tried to disappear into the background, but my Aunt Linda spotted me. Adeline, isn't today your birthday, too? Her voice was loud enough to carry. Dad laughed, a short, dismissive sound. Oh, we don't really count that. She's different. The words hit me like a slap. Aunt Linda's smile faltered. She leaned toward Uncle Robert and whispered something. I caught the words, poor girl, spiritually adopted, whatever that means. Across the yard, I saw Grandma Eleanor. She sat alone in a wicker chair, her silver hair catching the sunlight, her eyes tracking everything, watching, waiting. When our eyes met, she gave me a small nod. Just wait. That nod seemed to say, just wait. Dad wasn't finished. He clinked his glass again, and the crowd fell silent for what he clearly considered his grand announcement. Now, I want to share some exciting news about our family's future. He put his arm around Derek's shoulders. As most of you know, Eleanor, my wonderful mother-in-law, owns this beautiful home. When she eventually passes, God bless her, we plan to sell the property and use the proceeds to fund Derek's first business venture. Derek nodded like this was already a done deal. Some guests murmured their approval. I felt something crack inside me. Excuse me. My voice came out smaller than I intended. What about me? Dad didn't even look in my direction. You're an adult, Adeline. You've always been self-sufficient. Besides, he paused as if choosing his next words carefully. You're not technically family in the traditional sense. The silence that followed was suffocating. Aunt Linda looked horrified. Uncle Robert studied his shoes. A few guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. And me, I stood there champagne-less because apparently they'd run out before reaching me, feeling the full weight of 25 years crash down at once. Then came the sound of a cane tapping against the patio stones. Grandma. Eleanor rose from her chair with the slow, deliberate grace of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. She crossed the yard, guests parting like a sea before her, until she stood directly in front of my father. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. Richard, she said his name like a verdict. I believe you've forgotten whose house you're standing in.
Yeah.
Color drained from my father's face. Grandma turned to me, her eyes soft but fierce. Adeline, my darling, come with me. Grandma led me away from the crowd, her arm linked through mine, her grip stronger than I would have expected from an 82-year-old woman. We stopped near the rose bushes at the edge of the property, far enough from the party that no one could hear us. She turned to face me, her eyes glistening. Happy 25th birthday, my darling. Before I could respond, she reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out an envelope. It was cream-colored, thick, and sealed with a red wax stamp. The logo pressed into the wax was unfamiliar, a pair of balance scales with the letters C and A beneath them. Grandma, what is this? Your future. She pressed the envelope into my hands. But you cannot open it here. Go to your car, read it alone, and then, only then, decide what you want to do. Dad's voice. Cut through the garden. Mother, what is this? What are you doing? Family matters. Should be discussed. This is between me and my granddaughter. Grandma's voice didn't waver. You've had 25 years to discuss family. Matters with her, Richard. You chose not. 2. Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He wouldn't. Not with Eleanor. Not in front of witnesses. I looked down at the envelope. Cole and Associates. That was the law firm. I recognized the name. Grandma had mentioned them once years ago when she was talking about getting her affairs in order. Go, Adeline. Grandma squeezed my hand. I'll handle things here. I walked to my car in a daze. The sounds of the party faded behind me. The envelope felt heavy in my hands. Heavier than paper should feel. I sat in the driver's seat for an hour, just staring at it. Whatever was inside, I knew it would change everything. The sun had begun to set by the time I finally broke the seal. My hands were shaking. The wax cracked under my thumbnail, and I slid out the contents. 3 documents, each one more official looking than the last. The first was a birth certificate, not a copy, the original, with the raised seal of the state of Connecticut and signatures that had faded slightly with age. The second was a thick legal document, at least 15 pages, with headers that read Irrevocable Living Trust and a date from 1999, the year I was born. The third was a handwritten letter on lavender paper, Grandma's stationery, her looping script. I started with the letter. My dearest Adeline, it began. You are not adopted in spirit. You never were. Your father lied to justify his inability to love a daughter. I read that line 3 times. Then I read it again. Something between a laugh and a sob escaped my throat, not because it was funny, but because I had spent 25 years believing a lie that was never even properly constructed. I grabbed the birth certificate and scanned it frantically. Mother, Margaret. Louis Spencer, né Michel. Father, Richard James Spencer. Child, Adeline Marie Spencer. No adoption records. No amendments. No asterisks or footnotes suggesting I was anything other than their biological daughter. I was theirs. I had always been theirs. And they had lied to me anyway. The letter continued. I watched your father treat you like a second-class citizen from the day you were born. I couldn't change him, but I could protect you. This trust was my way of ensuring you'd have something of your own, no matter what they said or did. My hands were still shaking, but now it wasn't from fear. I turned to the trust document. It was dense with legal language. Grantor, beneficiary, irrevocable, but the key details were clear enough, even to my accountant's eyes. Type, irrevocable. Living trust, established March 15th, 1999, 3 days after my birth. Grantor, Eleanor and Mitchell. Sole beneficiari, Adeline Marie Spencer. And then the assets. 1 real property. The residential home at 47 Maple Grove Lane, Greenwich, Connecticut. Estimated current value, $1.2 million. 2 financial assets. Savings account, held at First National Bank. Current balance approximately $340,000. Condition, beneficiary shall assume full control of trust assets upon reaching the age of 25 years. I read the property section 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding. The house my parents had lived in for 30 years. The house my father had just promised to sell for Derek's business. It wasn't theirs. It had never been theirs. Grandma had let them live there, yes. But according to this document, notarized, witnessed by 2 independent parties, and filed with the Connecticut probate court, she had never transferred ownership. There was no deed in Richard or Margaret's name. They were occupants, nothing more. The letter continued. I knew this day would come, Adeline. I knew your father would try to erase you from the family's future. So I made sure 25 years ago that no matter what he did or said, you would have something that was entirely your own, something he could never take from you. I sat in my car as the last light faded from the sky. The document spread across my lap. For the first time in my life, I had proof that I mattered and proof that my father had built his entire kingdom on a foundation of lies. My first instinct was to march back into that party and throw the documents in my father's face. I imagined it, the gasps, the chaos, the look of horror on Dad's face as 40 guests watched his carefully constructed lies crumble. It would have been satisfying, cathartic, even, but that would have been his game. Drama, emotional explosions, the kind of scene he could later dismiss as Adeline being hysterical. No, I wanted this to be different. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number printed on the trust documents. Letterhead. Cole and Associates, how may I direct your call? I need to speak with Martin Cole. My name is Adeline Spencer. I believe he's expecting me. A pause. Then, 1 moment, Ms. Spencer. 30 seconds. Later, a warm baritone voice came on the line. Adeline, your grandmother told me you'd be calling. Mr. Cole, I need to understand. Is this real? Is this trust enforceable? Completely. Your grandmother was meticulous. The trust has been properly maintained for 25 years. As of today, your birthday, you have full authority over all assets contained within, including the property. My heart hammered. My parents don't know, do they? They know Eleanor set aside something for you. They assumed it was a small inheritance. A gesture. He paused. They have no idea about the house. What happens now? Your grandmother has requested a formal reading of her estate documents next Saturday. Ava already sent invitations to your parents and brother. His voice softened. She wanted the truth to come out properly, Adeline, in a setting where there can be no denial. 1 week. I could wait 1 week. Mr. Cole? Yes. Tell my grandmother. Tell her I understand now and thank her. For me. She knows, Ms. Spencer. She's always known. If you're still here, I want to ask you something. Have you ever discovered a truth that changed everything you thought you knew about yourself? Drop truth in the comments if you have. And if you're enjoying this story, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. Now, back to the week that changed my life. The calls started Monday morning. Dad was first. Adeline, we need you back this weekend. Your grandmother is getting her affairs in order, and the house needs to be prepared. Prepared for what? For after. His voice was impatient. She's not going to live forever. We need to make sure everything transitions smoothly. Translation, he wanted to make sure the house was ready to sell the moment Grandma was gone. Then came Mom's call on Tuesday. Your father is under a lot of stress about the estate, sweetheart. Maybe you could come help? Be a good daughter. Be a good daughter. The phrase made my stomach turn. Wednesday brought a text from Derek. Hey, cease. Dad says there's some paperwork we all need to sign when you come up, something about family coordination. No big deal. No big deal. I called Mr. Cole that afternoon. They want me to sign something, a family asset acknowledgement form. His voice sharpened. Don't sign anything, Ms. Spencer. Anything they ask you to sign right now is likely a waiver, an attempt to get you to relinquish any claim to the estate before the trust is revealed. They don't know about the trust. No, but they know your grandmother loves you, and they're worried she might have left you something. This is preemptive damage control. Dad's email arrived Thursday. The attachment was titled Spencer Family Asset Acknowledgement Form. I opened it just to see what they were asking. The document was simple. By signing, I would confirm that I had no legal claim to any assets of the Spencer or Mitchell family estates. They were trying to erase me before I could even fight back. Joke's on them. I already had everything. Friday night, there was a knock on my apartment door. Mom stood in the hallway, holding a bouquet of flowers. Chrysanthemums, my least favorite, but Derek's preferred choice. Can I come in, honey? Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She sat on my secondhand couch, her designer handbag looking absurdly out of place in my modest studio. Adeline, I know your father can be harsh, but he means well. He just doesn't know how to express affection toward a daughter. Harsh is one word for it. He loves you in his own way. She reached for my hand, and I know the situation with Grandma's estate is complicated, but signing that form, it would make things so much easier for everyone. It would. Keep the peace. Keep the peace. As if the peace hadn't been kept on my back for 25 years. Mom, do you even know what Grandma put in her estate? It doesn't matter what she put in it. What matters is that we're a family, and families don't fight over money. She squeezed my hand. Besides, honey, your grandmother is old. Her memory isn't what it used to be. If she said something strange to you at the party, well, sometimes elderly people get confused. I felt myself wavering. Maybe Grandma was confused. Maybe I was reading too much into everything. Maybe. My phone buzzed. A text from Grandma. They will try to make you doubt. Don't. I've waited 25 years for this moment. So, have you? I looked at my mother, at her perfectly applied makeup, her practiced concern, her flowers that weren't even. For me, I'm not signing anything, Mom. Her mask slipped just for a second. Then, she collected her bag and left without another word. The night before the reading, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The trust documents spread across my nightstand like evidence in a trial. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face, not angry, but dismissive. The same look he'd given me my entire life. You're not really family, so why do you care? Those words had haunted me for years. Every time I tried to speak up, every time I tried to assert myself, they'd echo in my head, making me shrink back into silence. But tonight, something was different. I got up and walked my closet, pushed past the worn dresses and faded sweaters, until I found it. A navy blue suit I'd bought 6 months ago. For a job interview, I'd been too scared to attend. Tags still on, never worn. I'd bought it with my own money. Money I'd earned from work that I'd done in a career I'd built without their help or support. I removed the tags and hung the suit on my door. Tomorrow, I wasn't walking into that room as the forgotten daughter. I wasn't going to ask permission to exist. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. Tomorrow, I was going to sit at a table of my own making. I thought about all the times I tried to earn their love, the perfect grades, the quiet obedience, the years of believing that if I just tried harder, they'd finally see me. None of it had worked, because the problem was never me. It was them. I fell asleep sometime after midnight, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't dream about being invisible. I dreamed about standing in the light. Saturday morning, 9 a.m., the offices of Cole and Associates occupied the top floor of a glass building in downtown Hartford, all polished wood and leather. Chairs and windows that overlooked the Connecticut River. Martin Cole was exactly what I'd expected. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, with the calm demeanor of a man who had seen 1,000 family disputes and knew exactly how this one would end. Ms. Spencer. He shook my hand warmly. Your grandmother speaks very highly of you. Is she here? No. She's not feeling well enough to attend in person, but she's authorized me to act on her behalf. He gestured to a chair. Before your family arrives, I want to make sure you understand what's about to happen. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a copy of the deed to the house, the original deed from 1994. Owner, Eleanor and Mitchell. There was no transfer deed, no bill of sale, no documentation showing the property had ever changed hands. Your parents have been living in that house for 30 years, Martin said, but they've never owned it. Your grandmother allowed them to stay, but she deliberately kept the title in her name. She never trusted your father to do right by you. I stared at the paper. And they don't know? They believe Eleanor gave them the house, verbally as a wedding gift, but without a deed transfer, a verbal agreement means nothing. He folded his hands. Legally, they're tenants. Tenants. Without a lease. The conference room suddenly felt smaller. Miss Spencer, Martin said gently, you don't have to say anything dramatic today. The documents will speak for themselves. I nodded. Outside, I heard the elevator ding. They were here. My father entered the conference room like he owned the place. He was wearing his best charcoal suit. Tom Ford, if I had to guess, with a silk tie and polished Oxfords. Mom followed behind him in a cream-colored dress, her pearls perfectly aligned. Derek brought up the rear, casual in khakis and a blazer, already looking bored. None of them acknowledged me. Martin. Dad extended his hand to the lawyer with practiced warmth. Good to see you. Let's get this formality over with. Shall we? We all know how Eleanor wanted things handled. Martin's expression remained neutral. Please have a seat. They arranged themselves at the table. Dad at the head, naturally with Mom, and Derek flanking him like attendants at a throne. I sat across from them, my folder, resting on my lap where they couldn't see it. Mom offered me a thin smile. I'm glad you're here, Adeline. Family should be together at times like this. Dad was already checking his watch, a Rolex, the same model he'd given Derek years ago. The ticking was the only sound in the room. So, Dad said, leaning back in his chair, what are we looking at? The house, the savings, standard distribution, I assume. Derek pulled out his phone. Hey, Dad, if we sell the house this quarter, I could have the down payment for the new office space by. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But Dad was smiling. He thought this was a done deal. I looked at Martin. He looked at me. The documents were in my folder. The truth was about to come out. Mr. Cole, I said quietly, I think we should begin. Martin nodded. Very well. Let's proceed with the reading of Eleanor Mitchell's estate documents. Dad's smile widened. It wouldn't last. Martin opened his own folder and began to read. The estate of Eleanor and Mitchell consists of the following assets. 1. A residential property located at 47 Maple Grove Lane, Greenwich, Connecticut, appraised at approximately $1.2 million. 2. A savings account held at First National Bank, current balance $340,000. 3. Various personal effects to be distributed per the attached inventory. Dad nodded along, doing the math in his head. I could practically see the dollar signs in his eyes. However, Martin continued, and something in his tone made my father freeze. These assets are not distributed through this will. The room went silent. What do you mean? Dad's smile faltered. If they're not in the will, then how these assets were placed in an irrevocable living trust in 1999. The will simply acknowledges their existence and confirms the trust's validity and continuity. Mom's hand found Dad's arm. Richard, what is he saying? I don't understand. Dad's voice had an edge now. Mother would have told me about a trust. This doesn't make sense. Derek looked up from his phone for the first time. Wait, so if it's in a trust, who's the beneficiary? Martin removed his glasses, cleaned them slowly, and set them back on his nose. That's an excellent question, Mr. Spencer. He turned to me. Miss Spencer, would you like to explain? Or shall I? All eyes shifted to me. Dad's face went pale. Mom gripped her pearls. Derek's mouth hung open. I thought about all the years of silence, all the years of being erased. Then I opened my folder. I'll explain, I said. I think it's time. I stood slowly, the folder in my hands feeling lighter than it had any right to. The sole beneficiary of Grandma Eleanor's irrevocable living trust, I said, is me, Adeline Spencer. It was established the day I was born. For a moment, no one moved. Then Dad shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the floor. That's impossible. My mother-in-law would never wouldn't she did. I handed the trust document to Martin, who fed it into the projector. The screen on the wall lit up with the first page, the date, the legal language, and there, in unmistakable bold print, the words that changed everything. Sole beneficiary, Adeline Marie Spencer. Mom made a small choking sound. Derek dropped his phone. This is a mistake. Dad's voice was rising. This has to be a forgery. Adeline couldn't possibly. She's not even real family. Actually, I reached back into my folder and pulled out the second document. I have something else to show you. Martin projected the birth certificate onto the screen. Mother, Margaret Louise Spencer, née Michel. Father, Richard James Spencer. Child, Adeline Marie Spencer. No adoption, no amendments, no spiritual anything. For the record, Martin said, his voice measured and calm. I verified this birth certificate with the Connecticut Department of Public Health. There is no adoption record, formal or otherwise, for Adeline Spencer. She is, and has always been your biological Daughter. The color drained from my father's face. Mom turned away, unable to meet my eyes. And me. I stood there in my Navy suit, purchased, with money I'd earned, holding documents that proved everything they'd ever told me was a lie. I'm not going to ask you why, I said. Quietly. I stopped needing your approval years ago. This is fraud. Dad slammed his hand on the table. I don't know what you've done, Adeline, but this. Manipulation, this isn't going to stand. His face had gone from pale to crimson. Veins bulged at his temples. This was the father I remembered from childhood. The one who used anger to control, who raised his voice to end conversations. But I wasn't 8 years old anymore. It's not manipulation, Dad. It's documentation. I kept my voice level. Notarized, witnessed, filed with the Connecticut probate court 25 years ago. Before you even started telling me I wasn't really yours. Richard. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Richard, please. Stay out of this. Margaret. He turned on me, finger pointed like a weapon. You think you're clever? You think you've won something? That house belongs to this family. It belongs to Grandma, I said, and now it belongs to me. Derek finally found his voice. Wait, so the house. The money Dad promised me for my business. None of that is ours. It was never yours to begin with. Martin's voice cut through the chaos. The property was never transferred to Mr. and Mrs. Spencer. They've been occupying it at Eleanor's discretion, without formal ownership. That's ridiculous, Dad sputtered. We've paid property taxes. We've maintained the grounds, paying taxes on a property you don't own doesn't transfer title, Mr. Spencer. You've essentially been tenants, without a lease agreement. The word tenants landed like a bomb. Mom started crying, quiet, shaking sobs. Derek stared at the wall like he'd been slapped. And Dad looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Fear. For the first time in my life, my father was afraid of me. Martin continued, his voice steady and professional. As per the trust terms, Ms. Spencer now has full control over all assets, including the residential property. The current occupants, Mr. and Mrs. Spencer, have been residing there without a formal lease or ownership agreement. You can't kick us out. Dad's voice cracked. We've lived there for 30 years. Everything we have is in that house. Actually, sir, Ms. Spencer has the legal right to do exactly that. The property was never transferred. You've been occupying it at Eleanor's discretion, and now at Adeline's. Derek stood up so fast his chair fell over. This is insane. Do something. Call a lawyer. We can fight. This. On what grounds? Martin's eyebrow rose slightly. The trust is airtight. Eleanor was meticulous in her planning. She anticipated challenges. The fight seemed to drain out of my father. His shoulders sagged. His hands, which had been clenched into fists, slowly relaxed. Then he turned to me, and his voice changed. Adeline, sweetheart, I